Hey guys, it's Graham. What's cracking? So there's a book that just dropped today on Audible. It is the third in a trilogy, but these are all very short stories. Each of these is between 2 and 3 hours long. They do not currently exist in print. However, they are connected to a book that does, and this is where the prospect gets really interesting. So the standalone book is called Gunrunner. It's co-written by Larry Correia and John Brown. And then the follow-up of short stories, they so far exist in the same world. Well, the same like literary world. It's out in space. It's in the future. There is a little bit of a hint of almost supernatural alien technology going on, but there's not faster than light travel. There's like generation ships, there's space stations, there's all that. So it's, humanity spreading out and terraforming and colonizing other planets. But other than that, it's not quite Star Trek. They're more or less bringing the same level of technology and civilization to other planets that you would expect. In Gunrunner, our main character is a guy who basically like this whole book reminds me of Firefly in terms of the expansion, the tech level, the type of characters that run it, the worlds that they go to, and even the plot of this particular story. If you remember the episode The Train Job of Firefly, it feels a lot like that. There's a plucky crew of a solo ship that takes a job. They're called gun runners because they'll move things for illegitimate outfits all the time. Sometimes they even work for different governments. Well, they've got to move a piece of tech that they then find out was stolen from somebody who is more like in the morally right, which is what happened in this train job episode. They end up having to double cross a warlord who's really, really bad news. In terms of the world building, there's probably only one element of this thing that I've got a complaint about, and that's the naming conventions. Now, granted, humanity has spread out so far that they've probably run out of Roman and Greek gods in the pantheon to name things after. And so they've taken a very workmanlike and pedestrian approach to naming things. So planets just get named after their most predominant trait. So our main character is a guy named Jackson Rook, and he's from Gloss. There's a space station where a lot of crime goes on. It's called Swindle. There's a jungle planet where basically everything is either an apex predator or some kind of predator, and it's called Lush. It's beautiful, but everything there wants to kill you. So it becomes a little bit glaring at times. That's a complaint that I would level at it. But other than that, it manages to avoid a lot of the normal problems that I find in a book that's co-written by two authors. My rule is a book written by two writers is twice as long as it needs to be. I was at LTUE, what year would this have been? Maybe 2018? It was several years ago when Larry Correia and John Brown put on a class about how to plot a novel. Their mindset was that a book is like 30 to 35 scenes, and a scene is about 4,000 words. Not using that as a hard and fast rule, but as a general approach to telling the story. And so from there, they did this class feedback activity where everybody would pitch things out like, okay, we need a team, we need a setting, we need this. They'd establish the basics. Okay, here's the pacing, here's how we would get from here to here to here. And it was fun, it was cool. And the class got to participate in plotting a story. And then he said, here's the one that we walked through, and we would do XYZ, and here's how it would end, and you see how to do it. It was kind of a beginner level class for people that didn't really know how to outline. There were a lot of pantser types writers out there, and I'm a heavy outliner, but I still wanted to know if there was a way to kind of improve my method there. So I attended the class, had a great time, and then a few years later, this book came out. Now, like many things that Larry writes, it was projected as like a standalone, but that one that had series potential, and the way that it ends, there is potential for a sequel. But it was published through Bain, and I guess Bain's sales numbers on this one were not high enough to their liking to keep going with it. It came out, I want to say, in early 2021, and so economically and travel wise and all that, everything was still kind of in the throes of spotty COVID lockdowns, and so that ended up killing a lot of the launch momentum for the book, which is very unfortunate. But here's where we get to the follow-up series of short stories that, as I said, we are given to understand externally that these happen in the same literary universe as Gunrunner, but based on the premise of the story, they're happening very, very far away. But with some success, I could see these like picking up and revitalizing this series, and eventually maybe Larry and John could get together and write another one. The first book is called Lost Planet Homicide. The premise is that there was a generation ship that got sent way deep out into space, and it was pulled through a wormhole or something and crashed on this planet that was like just on the knife's edge of hospitable. And the people were like, well, we can either try to survive or just die off or whatever. We don't have the technology to contact the home system, let anybody know where we are, that we're okay. And the ship is damaged. We don't have the technology to like build another engine. So here we are. And about 100 years later, our main character is a police detective, an inspector. The problem is that pretty much everybody on this planet is corrupt. There are corrupt cops, there's corrupt government, corrupt corporations, corrupt organized crime, everything. But this guy, Lutero Cade, is driven to be the last honest cop in this corrupt system. What inspires him to do this? Well, it turns out that he's descended from the navigator of the ship that everybody on this planet spawned from, and the navigator is blamed for what went wrong that caused them to go off course and crash land here. And so he wants to prove his worth and prove his mettle and do good under his family name by being an honest cop in a dishonest system. And when they come across a murder, like a good old-fashioned murder, and not just one that's like, you know, somebody did a regular crime of passion and tried to pass it off as something else, but like an organized hit, he starts pulling at the thread. And even if he ends up crossing powerful foes along the way, he's going to do his best to solve it. Now, when I first read this, and I think I even reread it in 2020 or so, or it would have been maybe 2021. When I first read this, I complained to myself that it had a very abrupt ending, but that's just kind of built in with A, the short story model, and B, the fact that it was always planned to be a series of short stories. There's not a whole lot of satisfaction and resolution, but basically, like, reading this book is like reading a couple of chapters of the start of a larger book. When the second one drops, Ghosts of Zenith, you get a glimpse into other goings-on the planet, and there's a case that has to do with the ship itself, which has kind of become like a pseudo-holy site to those on the planet. Like, even the local gangs don't mess with it, but then somebody does, and Lutero Cade and his partner Katanga get called in to do something about it. And again, they pull at the thread, more is revealed, and the story develops further. I'm being intentionally vague for two reasons. One, you can't find these books in print. And two, they're available on Audible if you have a current membership. I think you'd probably be able to buy them. And if you don't, like, just log in and buy them, and you use your Amazon login and all that stuff. But you guys know me. It makes sense for me to be an Audible member, so I've got access to them. And the third one, which is called the 5 Points Ripper, 5 Points is one of the areas on this planet. It just dropped today, so I'm going to listen to it tomorrow. I'll give you a verdict on that. But overall, I wanted to bring you guys up to speed on this literary universe and hopefully give you a reason to check out Gunrunner and check these out, because I want these to succeed. A, because they're very good on their own, and B, because if these shorter Lost Planet Homicide audiobooks, like if they succeed, like Larry will eventually, I think the plan is to release them in print. And if that one succeeds, like, hopefully it can give Gunrunner and its potential sequels a second chance. The main character in that one, like I said, Jackson Rook, he's a soldier, and he's famous because, well, he's a cyborg, like he's a human with some cybernetic upgrades. And during a battle on a planet, he got hacked by some malicious actors and was forced to use his mech to fire on friendlies and kill some of his comrades. And people understand like it wasn't his fault, but he still hates the fact that he was used in that way. And so even though he's a highly effective mech jockey, he refuses to do like the full-on cybernetic meld with machinery. He just operates it manually. Another member of the crew is a woman named Jane. She's a talented hacker, among other things. And during that hack, that famous hack that caused him to go all friendly fire, she's the one that broke him out of the spell. And so she's like really endeared to him. He really likes her, but she's got her own reasons for holding him at arm's length. She's got other stuff going on, and she tries not to let people get too close to her. Nevertheless, when Jackson and Jane and the other members of the crew that they're a part of get put on this job to steal a very, very advanced mech for a warlord whose name is simply Warlord, obviously because there's this threat that like, oh, he's deathly afraid to meld with mechs, the story then must require that he have to meld with a mech and open himself up to the possibility of getting hacked again by a malicious actor. And the tension builds really, really well. The action in this book, it's like, if you've read any other Larry Correia book, it's on par with that. The language is surprisingly mild. I have a feeling that that's part of John Brown's influence. I've read other books by him, and he just doesn't use profanity in his stuff, so I assume that he just wouldn't have wanted to here. And that's fine. Like, Larry's not a guy who feels like he has to go super overboard with that. Like, he's definitely authentic when it comes to profanity, but this one is clean on that front. It's just like there's some action violence and some combat gore and things like that. It's not overly glorified or descriptive, but at the same time, like there's a very, very painful scene in the third act where Jackson's got a lot going on. Like he's trying to operate a mech and he's trying to avoid being hacked, and like he's got this splitting headache because there's like all these computers in his brain fighting over him. Like there's a lot going on, but it's a very, very cool action set piece that works well. I pitched it on Upstream Reviews as the setting from James Cameron's Avatar with the toys from Mech Warrior and the plot from The Train Job from Firefly. That book is really great on its own, and I would love to see it get another surge in readership. And a good accessory to this overall world would be the Lost Planet Homicide stories. Go listen to those. Let me know what you think. Oliver Wyman, I believe he's the narrator for all of those. Yeah, so that makes sense. He's up there with guys like Tim Gerard Reynolds and Bronson Pinchot in terms of some of my favorite narrators. He even did an O. Henry trilogy that I really, really dug. So check that out. Let me know what you think. Till next time, drive safe. See you out there.